like Miss Julie, and I see Angela and Anissa and Armani, Bernadette, Drew, Era. Era, by the way, it was nice to meet you yesterday. Fred Tazardis, iPhone, don't know who that is. They want to remain anonymous, part of the NSA apparently. Mr. Wallace, good morning. Kendall Baker, good to have you and your energy. I can feel it just pulsating. Michelle and Skip. Skip, good to see you on here as well. So I'm glad you didn't skip it. Sorry, dad joke. That is so bad. Good morning. I got some laughs here locally, by the way. I just want you to know, those of you who are watching on Zoom. So, hey, listen, I wanted to talk this morning about, is there not a shift in the market? Have we seen a shift? Okay. And what is interesting is it's fascinating to watch how different people respond to the same set of circumstances. I see some agents whose business is down and they're panicked. And I see some agents whose business is up and they're not panicked. So somebody said something to me a couple of months ago. They said, it's not a buyer's market. It's not a seller's market. It is an agent's market right now. And what they meant by that, and it was, for me, it was profound to hear it because it really brought to the forefront of this thing that I'm going to talk about right here in the opening. It's about control. It's about not ceding control to the things that we don't control and say, well, it's because of those things that I can't, I won't, it's not possible. And just simply saying, well, what do I have control over that I could focus on? And if I did that, I could still get the results or better that I want, right? Right. So Steve Jobs, I don't know exactly the quote, but he said something to this effect. The guy, when he died, was worth somewhere around 80 to $100 billion. A little bit of money? Yeah. Probably knows what it takes to create a lot of wealth. Yes. Right? He said that if you are born poor, it's not your fault. But if you die poor, finish the sentence. It is your fault, gang. Think about that. If you are born poor, it is not your fault. But if you die poor, it is absolutely your fault. So it goes back to the thing about control. The market has shifted. Yes, it has. You're right. And interest rates are about double what they were a year ago. Yes, they are. And we're seeing that inventory is increasing. That's because homes aren't selling as fast. And buyers are not as prone to just come in and offer whatever. Are they not being a little bit more obstinate, a little bit more certain about the fact that they've gained a little bit of power on the playing field of real estate, right? So we have felt that shift. But the question is, what can we do, given that, to make certain that we don't see a drop in our business? Is it possible in a shifting market like we're seeing with interest rates going up that you actually maintain or increase your business so you don't see a decline? And the answer is what? Unequivocally, yes, it is. So I want all of you who are here, but also those of you who are watching on Zoom, to just get that. So the question I would ask you is, are you taking control of the things that you have control over to ensure that despite what's happening in the marketplace, that you see an increase in your business year over year? Because I know that you can, because I'm watching people in this market, in this company, who are doing that. The question is, are you paying attention to what you have control over? And ultimately, the number one thing that we have control over is what? Ourselves. Yes, it's ourselves. And in real estate, the number one thing that we have control over immediately is what we do on a daily basis. So I want to talk specifically about formulas and predictability and duplication of outcome. If I say to McDonald's to you, what do you think of? What are some of the words or phrases that come to mind?
Golden arches.
I thought somebody was going to say I'm loving it, but thank you.
Okay.
Golden arches. But when you think about the business, from a business standpoint, what do you think about? Okay, Big Macs. Successful. How many Big Macs? Billions, right? Over the course of years, right? International, right? In other words, go ahead. Supersized, yes, yeah. Heart disease, I'm sorry, right? But they do have salads now, okay? But you think about that, McDonald's, they are very successful. They sell a lot of burgers and a lot of food, supersized, because they are very what? They're very consistent. They're very consistent because they follow what? Formulas, right? In other words, they follow a formula that works consistently for them, and so therefore they continue to do it. Here's an interesting statistic. The average NFL player will spend 40 minutes of practice time off the field to every 1 minute of actual regulation time played. So when they're playing 1 minute on the playing field on Sunday, they're spending another 40 minutes off the field practicing just to have the opportunity to play that 1 minute on the field on Sunday. Pretty interesting ratio, right? Think about it. It's a 40-1. Now, think about that. Think about, do you have anything in your life where there's a 40-1 ratio where you're putting 40 amounts of effort to have the opportunity to do 1 unit of performance or opportunity? And I would say that the average person can't say that they do. It's the exceptional person. That's why most people who play football, do they play in the NFL? No, they don't. Michael Phelps would swim for 6 hours a day. Now, is that a little more or a little less than what the average swimmer does? I don't think I have swam 6 hours in my lifetime. I'm not a really good swimmer, but he was doing that on a daily basis. And he had a formula that he followed every single day. He did a certain thing. In other words, he watched the way in which he was swimming, his strokes, his breathing, all of those things, and he practiced it. He practiced more in the pool by himself than he ever swam in competition with people watching. Think about that. And the same is true of Yo-Yo Ma. He said he's the cello virtuoso, right? World renowned, this guy. Nobody plays the cello better than Yo-Yo Ma. He said that he's practiced the cello over 10,000 hours, meaning by himself in a room, nobody watching. More hours doing that than he has performing on stage for millions of people. Think about that ratio. So then we talk about real estate, people getting into real estate or being in the business a long time and wanting to make a little bit of money or a lot of money. A lot of money, right? I mean, I think everybody got into the business to make a lot of money. It's not a philanthropic endeavor for you, is it not? Me? I know it's not for you because you've got some good business happening right now. You're getting paid. But you have to put effort in. You have to, real estate's a business, gang, where you can invest a couple $1,000s and make millions of dollars. Now you tell me a business where you can do that. And literally in your first year, because I've watched new licensees do it in their first year, make $250,000 and they invested $2,000. Now you tell me another business where you can do that, invest $2,000 and make $250,000 in your first year. If they exist, I'm not aware of them. This is a great business, but you have to pay attention to some of the fundamentals. And one of the fundamentals is, gang, we got to make certain that we're acting methodically. We're taking control of the things that we have control over. So one of the things that we have control over is making certain that we practice our skill. The market has shifted. And so because the market has shifted, we've got to take an assessment. Okay, how do we have to adjust our approach compared to what we were doing last year when the market was maybe quote unquote easier, right? When it was easier to take a listing to get it sold. And now it's going to there's going to be a little bit more competition, a little more difficult to get the home sold. Seller or buyer is going to be a little more obstinate, a little more firm on what they're going to offer or not offer, right? And so therefore, we're going to have to generate more opportunities and also be a better what? Ultimately, because a communicator, yes, to be a better communicator, better agent, a better leader. Your number one skill in the business of real estate is your ability to communicate. And what is interesting, if you take a look at any organization, or you take a look at the most highly paid or most influential people in the world, those people all have one thing in common. It's their ability to what? Communicate. So when you increase your ability to communicate, you have the ability to go out and inspire people, motivate people, to help people feel safe, to build rapport, to help to make sure that they like you, they trust you, they respect you. And in the process, because you help people when they like, trust, and respect you, you help them feel what? Confident. When you help buyers and sellers, potential buyers and sellers, those prospects feel more confident when they're talking to you, they're more likely to what? They're more likely to want to do business with you because you're offering value to them. Your number one value is your ability to communicate with another human being to help them feel what? Confident. Confident that they're talking to the right person to help them through the process of buying or selling a home. Because buying or selling a home, is it an easy process? It is not. Even for the professionals who do it every day, it's not an easy process. Is it a scary process? It can be, especially for people who maybe do it once or twice or 3 or 4 or 5 times during the course of their lifetime, right? So I just want you to, the first question I would have you ask yourself is, am I practicing enough my skill of communicating? And if you're not, then maybe you should consider doing that, because if you expect to earn a lot of money, hundreds of thousands or millions, the way a Michael Phelps does, or NFL players, or a Yo-Yo Ma, then you probably should put in some practice time in terms of proving your skill, just as they have, in order to make the big bucks. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to be a 40-to-1 ratio. You don't have to practice 40 hours to 1 hour conversation with a buyer or seller. But just imagine if you practiced every day for an hour, like we say in the 12 steps to the summit of success. I practice my skill set for an hour every single day. Imagine if you set aside the time to do that, what would happen to your business? Dramatically. What would happen to your skill set if you truly practiced an hour every single day, your skill of communicating with other human beings? Would it improve your ability to communicate? A little bit or a lot? Yeah, an hour a day. Isn't it worth investing an hour a day to improve your ability to communicate, to instill confidence in people, so that you can go from making a little bit of money to making a lot of money? Because I can tell you that if you look at the top producers in this company, whether we're talking to Kathleen Bruno or a Tina Hare or a Trish Perez, a Blake Mashburn, and the list goes on and on, a Kay Bolton Wilson, all of these people, I can tell you, they all have one thing in common. It's their ability to what? Communicate. So I want you to write this down, okay? If you're gonna write anything down, write this down. Great conversations are nothing more than a pattern. Great conversations are nothing more than a pattern. So if you recognize what that pattern is, then you can practice the pattern. And the more you practice it, the more you understand it, then what happens? Like anything. Like, remember the first time that you got on a bike, you didn't stop riding the bike, right? You kept trying, you fell down, got back up, got on it, and you kept doing it. But over time, over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, 4 months, a year, what happened to your skill of riding a bike? It improved, because you continue to what? Practice, ride the bike. So if you'll do the same thing with the patterns of great communication, you'll do nothing but get better and better and better. And when you get better at communicating and instilling confidence in people, in other words, really adding value to the process, then you're going to make a lot more money. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Fair enough?
Yes.
So then the question is, well, John, what's the pattern? What's that formula? What's the formula in real estate, like the formula in burger making that McDonald's uses? What's that formula in real estate? Anybody want to know? Okay, so this crowd doesn't. Anybody in Zoom want to know? Would you like to know?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell me,
So
John.
it's okay. Thank you, Chris. It's called the response pattern. That's what I call it. So write that down. Response pattern. And Nagme, she's shaking her head knowing, yep, that's right. It is. Nagme could probably get up here and probably teach us on this. But the response pattern is nothing more than a formula. And those of you who have not heard this before, man, you should be taking notes. And if you've heard it before, still take notes, because my question is, could you stand here in front of a group of 20 or 30 people and go through the finer points of the response pattern and role play it so that you could teach others? And if you could do that, then I know that you grasp it and you understand it. If you can't, then you should practice it to the extent you could do that, so that when you are talking to buyers or sellers, you don't have to think about, oh my gosh, what do I do next? What did John say was the response pattern? You can just simply naturally do it. And if you do that, you worry less about what you're saying, and you can focus more on what they are saying, which becomes a great what? Conversation. So it's called a response pattern. The first part to the response pattern, number one, is to ask a question. Because the number one, and listen to this, what I'm saying here, the number one building block to rapport, the number one building block to rapport is asking questions. You want to have a great conversation? Ask what? Yeah. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody where you ask all the questions, they answer all the questions, and you walk away them never having asked a question about you? Has that ever happened? Right? But if you ever have been in a conversation with somebody where they ask you a ton of questions about you, who you are, where you're from, what you like, what you've been doing lately, how many kids you have, are you married, like kids, don't like kids, what's your favorite color, and you walk away from that person, do you hate the person or do you like the person? Do you like the person? And the question is why? I mean, they just interrogated you. They took interest. Remember, gang, the number one human need is acknowledgement or validation or acceptance. And when you ask people questions, you take that first step towards building rapport, which is absolutely necessary in a business relationship. People have to like, trust, and respect you. That's what rapport is. The number one building block of rapport is asking what? Questions. So the response pattern formula says, well, then if that's the case, let's start the conversation by asking a question. So imagine, Ahmed, that you are a homeowner, and I call you up to let you know that I just recently sold a home in your neighborhood, or my company sold a home in the neighborhood. And I'm just going to call you, and I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to ask a question. Okay, so here we go. Ring, ring. Hello, is this Ahmed? Ahmed, this is John Ciet. I'm a real estate agent with Century 21 Everest. My company just recently sold a home over on USA Drive. And it was listed for 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, and it sold for $890,000. I was just calling to see when you plan on selling your home. Okay, so she said to me she has no plans. Now, the number one step in the response pattern is what? And remind me of your name. Shauna. The number one step in the response pattern is what? Yeah, it's a pattern, but what was the number one thing to do in the response pattern? Ask a. So did I ask a question? Okay, so that's the first part. Ask the question. Okay, the second step of the response pattern, if you're going to ask a question, if you're normal, if you're an adjusted person, if you're going to do the right thing in terms of building a great conversation, is when you ask the question, you should probably do what? Listen. So step number 2, and this is not rocket surgery, gang. And I said rocket surgery. I combined rocket science and brain surgery, right? It's not rocket surgery. It's really simple. Ask the question. And when you ask the question, step number 2 is to what? Is to listen. See, as real estate sales agents, we have all of the what? People have the buyers and sellers, especially sellers, they have all the what? All the questions. And as a result, we have all the what? And because we have all the answers, we have a tendency to want to do all of the what? So we come in right out of the gate and we start doing all the talking. Let me tell you about how great I am and my company is and all the things that I know and me, my, you, and me. And I'm going to do all these amazing things. Do you love me? And they look at you like, I am so tired of this conversation. When is it going to end? Right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Right? Versus a conversation where you go in and you begin to ask questions. Now you may say, well, John, I don't like that question. I don't like to right out of the gate, call somebody up and say, when do you plan on moving? I don't even know them. Well, I get it. But my belief is this. If I'm calling for a purpose, right? My purpose is I'm trying to find people who want to buy or sell real estate. So my purpose is to then get to that issue very quickly. I want to take a temperature check or a temperature gauge immediately. Where is she in terms of the idea of buying or selling real estate? And she told me right out of the gate that she what? She has no what? No intentions of doing that. So some of you might say, well, if she has no intentions, then I guess the conversation's over, right? No, because I'm going to listen to what she said. And then step number what? Step number 3 is I'm going to use what's called a transitional statement that allows me to go from that topic of when do you plan on moving to something other than that. Okay, so it's a transitional statement. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to ask you the question again, just give me the same response, but speak up so everybody can hear you. Okay, because they need to hear you as well. So I was just calling to find out when you plan on moving.
I'm not.
Okay, you're not. You know what? Now that I know that, let me ask you, how long have you lived in your home? Now, before you answer it, notice what I did. I asked the question. So I started the response pattern by asking the question. And then number 2, I did what? I listened. Okay, now, one of the important parts of listening is to repeat what she said, to let her know that I was what? Listening, because the number one human need is what? Acknowledgement. So when she tells me that she doesn't have any plans on moving, I just simply say, you don't have any plans on moving. You know what? If I were you, I'd feel the same way too. As important as that is, or now that I know that, let me ask you, how long have you lived in your home? So what we've done is we've covered the first step of the response panel, which is to ask a what? Then number 2 is to what? And then number 3 is to what? Okay, yes, the repeat and affirm knock me is going to be part of that listen part, right? And then step number 3 is to what, Chris? The transitional statement, which could be now that I know that, or as important as that is, or having said that, that just, instead of me saying, I use that phrase. Now that I know that, as important as that is, or having said that, it allows me to collect my thoughts and then get focused on the next what? The next question, which is step number 4. Step number 4 is to ask the next question. And my intention is to ask 3+ questions. The response pattern says ask 3 or more questions at this point. And the reason for that is this. Right next to number 4, pattern interruption. Write that down. Next to number 4, you've written down number 4 is to ask 3+ questions. Right next to that, write down the phrase pattern interruption. Okay. The pattern interruption is basically this. It interrupts the pattern that we were in. The pattern was she had no intentions of selling her home, no intentions of moving. And so I either had to end the conversation there or shift the conversation to a different topic so we could continue what? Yeah, so we can continue the conversation, so we can continue speaking. It's called a pattern interruption. So I shift the focus from that to what? To not, do you have any plans on moving? But the question I asked was what? You remember? Yeah, how long have you lived in the home? That has nothing to do with whether she wants to buy or sell the home. It has everything to do with how long have you lived in the home? So I asked that question, how long have you lived in the home? And Nakame says what?
10 years.
Oh, so you've lived in the home 10 years? That's great, good for you. And how did you happen to pick this area?
Just a job move.
Okay, so you did a job transfer to the area?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. What do you do?
So it was actually for my husband's job, and it was he's in system security.
Oh, he's a system security a guy with the rocket agency. He's a rocket scientist. No, you are. You're the rocket scientist. No, again, you get my point. What I'm doing in this situation, she told me she wasn't interested. I'm asking questions that don't have anything to do with the reason I called. And you might say, well, John, why would you waste your time doing that? Because my goal is to build what? Rapport. And I'll give you a great example of this. I remember calling this one, and this happened many, many times, but this one scenario, this one experience just sticks in my mind. I remember doing some just listed, just sold calls, called in the area to let them know that we had just listed a home for sale. And I asked that question, do you have any plans on moving now or in the future? And the lady said, nope, we've only been in the home for 4 years. We're going to stay. I said, great. So I repeated and affirmed what she said. And then I went through and I said, well, how did you happen to pick this area? Well, we wanted to be in the neighborhood. It was close to the schools we wanted to be into. And she said, and quite frankly, it was the price range that we could afford. We couldn't afford the other areas. Great. We continued the conversation. We talked about what she likes about the home, confirming again that she'd been in the home for 4 years, where they had moved from, and the number of kids that she had. All of these things, we were having a great conversation. Well, 15 minutes into the conversation, from the point where she said, nope, don't have any interest, we don't have any plans on moving, she said to me this. She said, you know, it's interesting. My husband and I have been talking recently about we should probably buy a Rambler because he's having problems with his knees. And our master bedroom is on the 2nd level, and he's having a hard time going up and down the stairs. She said, it's actually an interesting thing that you called. Now, we went from nope, don't have any interest, to we actually have been talking about selling the home. Now, did I convince her in 15 minutes to consider selling her home? And the answer is what? No. What happened? What changed? What went from no, don't have any interest, to her admitting that they've actually been talking about getting a Rambler? In other words, selling their home. What changed? Oh, I made her think, but more specifically, what? She started to trust me, because in the beginning, she didn't what? She didn't trust me because we didn't have any what? Didn't have any rapport. So I want you to think about that. Great conversations start with asking questions, and then they're continued by what? Step number 2, listening. And then step number 3, transitioning, because in most cases, they're not going to say, yes, we're interested, we want to do something now. Sometimes they will. The transitional statement, then asking how many questions in step number 4? 3+ questions, which how many questions did I ask? At least 3, right? And then once I get the answers to those questions and we have a great conversation, if they don't automatically volunteer that they might be interested, then I'm going to circle right back around. Step number 5 is to then ask the closing question. Well, so Nakame, I know you've indicated that you don't have any interest in selling your home, but have you ever thought about maybe buying an investment property?
Well, I haven't really thought about that, no.
Okay, so she said, well, I haven't really thought about that. And then I'm going to continue the conversation there. Again, I want you to see there are 5 steps to the response pattern. Is there anything in that that is complicated?
No.
The thing that's complicated about it is not knowing it, not having it memorized, and then not leveraging it consistently. But if you know it, you memorize it, you don't have to think about it, but you rather just do it. Because I want you to think about it. An Olympian, a Michael Phelps, for example. Do you think that when just before his heat starts, do you think he's trying to go through his stroke patterns and his breath patterns and thinking about how he has to stand on the block? Do you think that that's really what he's thinking about? And the answer is no, because he's practiced so many times standing on the block, his strokes and his breath patterns over and over again. He doesn't think about it. When that gun goes off or that buzzer goes off, he just what? He just does it without any conscious thought. It is all subconscious. But in order to do that, he has to practice to such a high level, right, that he doesn't have to think about it, which then it takes us full circle to what we talked about in the beginning. Are you practicing enough the skill set that you need to be the agent who can earn whatever amount of money that they want to, regardless of what's happening in the marketplace?
Yes.
And if you are, then congratulations, because it tells me then that you are practicing and you're presenting in ways that are commensurate to or equal to the amount of money that top producers or professionals earn in any line of business, including real estate. Okay, what I want you to walk away from is a greater sense of control and something that you can focus on that will give you traction, as opposed to all the shiny objects out there that people will tell you that if you just do this, that it's going to be a miracle, your business is going to improve overnight. You can buy these leads, you can use this particular gizmo or gadget, or use this particular app, and the heavens are going to part and manna is going to fall from the heavens. Let me just tell you something. If you have to pay for it, it's probably too good to be true. The number one thing that you have control over is yourself. And the number one skill that you have in the business of real estate is your ability to communicate with other human beings. The number one value that you offer to people in real estate is your ability to influence them in a way that helps them to feel what? Confident. So that they trust you to take them through a complicated, scary process so that they're willing to pay you 7 or 6% commission. Because that is possible in today's marketplace, but you've got to practice. You got to recognize the patterns of success. So any thoughts, any questions as we wrap this up? Okay, you're very welcome. All right, so we know the routine.